Boy, if Washington and Wall Street are proving my theory that they are in alternate universes, today is really crystallizing it. Wall Street racing to new records because any gain from yesterday when we had 3 new records is going to be added gains today. As this impeachment goes on, only the 3rd time in the last century. So what to make of that? Because leaders are making their case for, well, how odd it is.
Very sadly now, our founders' vision of a republic is under threat from actions from the White House. That is why today, as Speaker of the House, I solemnly and sadly open the debate on the impeachment of the President of the United States. If we do not act now, we would be derelict in our duty.
Really? After we just said the Pledge of Allegiance, we go back to the Speaker's own words and said it would be dangerous to leave it to the voters? I will tell you right now, Madam Speaker, we on the Republican side have no problem taking our case to the majority and to the people of this country.
All right, it's all one way. Most Democrats lining up in favor of impeachment, or virtually all Republicans dead set against it. It will probably play out that way in the Senate when it gets to a trial there. The backdrop is a pretty good economy, pretty strong economy, and a very good stock market. Could that be the one thing that saves the president? Let's get the read right now from the Wall Street Journal editorial board member, James Freeman. We got B. Riley Wealth Management Chief Investment Strategist, Paul Dietrich, and Iona College political science professor, Jeannie Zaino. Jeannie, ended with you. Let me begin with you. I mean, it is like an alternate universe, isn't it? I mean, this is a big deal, whether you agree or disagree with the impeachment method, that it is historic, and yet the market's hitting historic highs.
The market's hitting historic highs because they know the outcome of this, as we all do, which is that the president will be impeached in a few hours and he will be acquitted in the Senate in early January. So the risk that would make the market move is simply not there to make it decrease. So it's humming along because the economy is good. I think as we move into 2020, the market may change its tune because that is where they may see some risk, depending on if you get an Elizabeth Warren as the Democratic nominee or a Bernie Sanders or, you know, what.
Well, I could make an argument there, Paul. The market, which generally likes making money, would assume that those type of nominees would be so easy to beat that it would actually help their case. I don't know, but I mean, what do you think?
I agree with you, but you know, there's some historical precedent here. If you look back at the Clinton impeachment, from the day the impeachment inquiry started to the day he was acquitted, the market was up 27%.
That's right.
You know, when you know the outcome, it's not going to have any impact on the economy or the stock market.
You know, the one thing you wonder about, though, is Bill Clinton maintained a certain level of popularity this president does not enjoy. Now, and that's a bit of an anomaly in and of itself, because you can argue, given the strong economy and the strong markets, he should be up significantly more than he is in the polls. But your thoughts?
Yeah, he seems to be getting a little more popular lately, maybe because of the impeachment. But I think the message of the markets is really interesting here. And it's not just that the economy's good and therefore investors like that. I think we've seen the markets as really a reality check on Washington's noise throughout this presidency. And right now, I think the market is really a rebuttal to the Democratic case in the House, because if the Republic was really under threat, if Trump was really destroying our rule of law in this country, as we keep hearing from Democrats in this process, investors would be fleeing. Investors don't like to invest in places where there is no rule of law.
Or where there's a risk and the uncertainty, to your point. And one of the things that I always argue here, and it's not a political statement, it's just that Wall Street, I've said this so long people get tired of hearing it, including you guys, but it's not a matter of being a red or blue place. It's green. They like making money. They made it hand over fist with Bill Clinton. They're making a hand over fist with Donald Trump, and they want that to continue.
They want that to continue, and I think, to James's point, they see this, just how the president has described it, as a partisan witch hunt. And I think it's a great point about Bill Clinton, because there are similarities here where they see this as a partisan endeavor, and I think, unfortunately, we may see this in the future to come more and more, where impeachment is used as a partisan weapon, and the markets will probably simply say, oh, it's very much like other partisan weapons that are used. We're going to keep going along, and we're not going to be impacted by it.
And it's the world in which we live. Oh, by the way, something that the Labor Secretary, Eugene Scalia, took up a little bit earlier with Maria Bartiromo. Take a look at this.
The biggest surprise to me there, as sure the son of a justice, but somebody who's a lawyer, followed the court for a long time, is how small and unimportant it seems right now. Impeachment is meant to be a very serious step. There's just a feeling, I think, here and certainly outside of town, that it's not a serious exercise right now. That is sad.
I don't know whether his dad would have said the same thing, probably, but the gist of it is that we've weaponized impeachment, and a lot of Republicans feel, maybe cynically, that it will happen again and again. And I'm wondering if that's true. What do you think?
I think we're making it easier and easier to have impeachment, and just as during the Clinton impeachment basically said we will never ever impeach a president for sexual peccadillos, so that's now off the table forever.
But in so doing, we also said it's okay to lie. It's okay to lie under oath, and
yes.
and maybe for a fine reason. Who's going to tell the truth about that? I get it, but that the standards started changing, and that was where the slippery slope started. What do you think?
But do you really want to remove a president from office because he told a lie? I mean,
no, I actually agree with that. I just think that now it sort of opened the floodgates for the same kind of thing that exists now and might exist more in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Republicans feel like they paid a price in the following election in '98 for that prosecution of Bill Clinton. So since then, they didn't try to impeach Obama. There was not an impeachment vote in the House.
Although it was a Republican 2 years later who won the presidency, but there was enough of a gap.
That's true. And we can get into. I think that was the American people kind of partly giving Al Gore the tab for Bill Clinton's mistakes or whatever you want to call them. But the point is that there is a political check. If the American people do not want this to become a regular part of our politics, they can express that very clearly in 2020, not just with their presidential vote, but how they vote for members of Congress who played various roles in this.
I just wonder how everyone gets back together after this.
Well, in an odd way, impeachment has brought Congress and the president together. You look at the USMCA, that never would have happened.
That's a good point.
Democrats never would have agreed to that, and the president may not have agreed to some of the changes if they were not both in political peril.
So they both wanted to look like they were doing something.
They both have to go home to their districts and say they are doing things. Otherwise, Democrats get clobbered in 2020. And the president likewise wants to say he's like Bill Clinton. He's on the job.
So this kind of gridlock,
it's bringing us together.
Less lock is getting stuff done. Wall Street will like that.
Well, one of the things that we now know that sexual peccadillos and lying to the FBI or even lying to the American people, which all politicians do, is not an impeachable offense. But I keep wondering, what is an impeachable offense? I mean, it does bother me that the president tried to kind of play around with our elections.
I do. I think we should clarify.
That it wasn't
the Clinton impeachment.
It wasn't a perfect call.
He was impeached for lying under oath, and he lied under oath to derail a sexual harassment lawsuit against him. So I think I wouldn't call it a peccadillo, but I think it did.
But compared to this, where you could be talking to a leader of a sovereign nation about inserting themselves into a U.S. election.
Yeah, that bothers me.
No, I was going to say, I think the American people did obviously decide that was not something that justified removal. I think for this one, they're going to look at it. I think at the end of the day, you look at this and you say that Hunter Biden deal should be examined.
But, people may get there if Democrats wouldn't do this on the electoral calendar. If they had waited for the court to bring, whoever it was, John Bolton, Mick Mulvaney, others, to the table, if they weren't doing this for electoral reasons, the American public may have gotten there where you are saying they're not comfortable with this. But the Democrats are pushing this along because they got to get this done now. That's a problem to me.
Yeah, we won't know until next November how that all sorts out, right? In the meantime, with us right now to talk about all of this is James Friedman of the Wall Street Journal, Jeannie Zaino, the Iona College political science professor, and Paul Dietrich, last of all, B. Riley Wealth Management Chief Investment Strategist. Paul, on the economy and everything else going, we were talking in the last segment when we were all together about the expectation nothing happens in the Senate with impeachment. Certainly nothing changes the market environment, the economic environment. But you were raising something interesting about don't assume it's a gimme. It's fast and without incident in the Senate. Could you explain?
The thing that people want to watch is Chief Justice Roberts. He's going to preside over this. He has a lot of leeway, and he's an institutionalist. He does not want this to seem like a sham trial. He's very big on fairness and process.
Does he have any role in it? I thought he'd have to cede to the Senate rules.
Well, that's the question. The Senate, Mitch McConnell, could say, we oppose your ruling, and if they have 51% of the votes in the Senate, he's overruled. But this is where Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, Murkowski, Gardner, Alexander, who's not running for office, these five could change that.
Five Republicans. They wouldn't be voting for impeachment. They just vote and open the process up and get waited.
Yeah, they'd be supporting the Chief Justice. That's what's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and I do think, I don't know where they will sit, but I think that's going to be the most intrigue, to your point, that we're going to see in this whole process. And, for most of us, we don't see, John Roberts, but we don't see John Roberts. We don't see the Supreme Court in action.
He's our White House correspondent. He's doing a great job.
That's who he is.
Yeah, it's a different guy. Well, let me ask you, though, about that. I mean, we were just saying how much you rely on the expected. That's the expected.
Yeah.
That it just sails through the Senate. It's short, sweet, goodbye. But it falls right in this. All of a sudden, there's a little bit more drama to it than we give credit. How would the markets respond to that?
Yeah, I think if there's first of all, I'm not sure it's bad for Trump if it does become a longer trial with more witnesses.
He was apparently itching for that.
It certainly injects a lot of uncertainty into it, so I guess that part of it markets would not like.
Well, he wouldn't be keen on John Bolton or Mick Mulvaney as chief of staff testifying, as I think Chuck Schumer wanted, right?
Yeah,
and
but
they opened the floodgates.
But he'd be excited for the Biden testimony, both Hunter and Joe. I think that could be a long few hours or days. I don't know for Democrats.
I would be excited for that too.
Yeah, I want to bring Charles Payne into this because I think his mic is okay right now. And Charles, we're talking about the possibility that maybe we've got it wrong, assuming it's just done and out with the Senate. When there could be a little bit of drama, there could be witnesses, there could be a demand where the Chief Justice Roberts forces the issue. Again, in a Senate chamber where all it takes is a couple of Republican votes to at least progress to that stage. What do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think that's been a calculus amongst the Republicans. Do you try for something short and sweet that you can consider mostly a slam dunk, or do you get very aggressive with this because it can be a double-edged sword? The longer it lasts, the more chances of something happening, someone changing their mind. And, there's two things going on here. There's the actual impeachment process, and then there's the court of public opinion. President Trump is overwhelmingly, in my mind, and according to the data, won in a court of public opinion. So just how much does he want to risk that victory? He's crossing the finish line, take the victory lap and move on with the economy. Or, call up the Hunter Bidens of the world and maybe create problems you don't want.
So what do you see happening, Charles?
I think it's going to sail through. Last couple of weeks ago, the Michigan Sentiment Report, 1% of the respondents said they care about impeachment. We see how it's doing in the polls. Meanwhile, we see what the stock market is doing. It's absolutely phenomenal. The economy is absolutely phenomenal. Neil, we had about 7 data points in the last 3 days that point to a monster 2020, really driven by household formation and bigger business investment. So I think we're on a really amazing path right now, and I would hate to see it disrupted.
I thought it was 6, but if you say 7, fine.
We're splitting hairs.
Yeah,
You probably
right.
counted. I counted something twice.
I'm going to expand my panel a little bit here, but before you go, is it your understanding right now that the backdrop of the strong economy, the strong markets, very clear, no one would argue that persists right into and through 2020? I believe Bank of America was calling it a melt-up in the next quarter. You have coming on these others saying it continues, on and on and on. Morgan and some of these others talking about the recessionary fears fading. Where are you on all of that?
I think melt up is sort of dismissive, and it really does not play into what really is happening here. We're at a place in confidence in Main Street America where people now, or millennials, others, moving out, forming households, having families, where businesses are going to come back. They're going to invest tons of money in intellectual property. They're going to buy a lot of equipment. It's just going to be the best of all things. And listen, success begets success. and winning begets winning. And I just can't see how the only thing that I think could derail it would be the Federal Reserve. And I really believe Powell will not do it, will not go there.
All right. Charles, thank you. Welcome back. We'll be going to you in about 15 minutes. Sorry about the microphone problem. I don't know what happened. All right. I'm interested in just his view of the economy and the backdrop of that. Nothing could derail it 2020. There are a couple of things that could punctuate that, though, right? I mean, if all the money, presumably, or more of it comes off the sidelines, and you buy the counter indicator that everyone gets giddy, that's a counter indicator, right?
Yeah, but I mean, fact set, the consensus estimates for next year are that we're going to have 9.4% earnings. That's great. I mean, the market ought to be up 10% next year on that alone.
Or
if you just look at the fundamentals with that. And then also, let's face it, this president needs this economy to go through November 3rd in the election. He's going to use every lever of power that he has. He's going to badger the Federal Reserve into lowering rates if he needs to. And there was a recent University of Chicago study that said, if you pump enough money into the economy, you can extend an economic growth period. You just can't extend it forever.
What do you think, Jenny?
I do think the president does need that, and he needs it through November of next year. And I think he's going to use every lever to do that, but I don't think it's a sure thing at this point. I mean, look, we have the China deal, and at least the first stage, and yet we don't know if they're going to live up to their part of the bargain. So, there are still question marks out there.
Well, they do have a history of lying.
Right? That's right.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm not sure he's going to need all that many levers because of that China deal you mentioned, because of this trade peace now with Mexico and Canada. I think we get that corporate capital expenditure number moving up again. I think people now have the confidence to invest, so I would expect a pretty good economy going forward.
All right, we'll take a quick break here, guys. We are focusing on other developments like these markets racing ahead, and like some premier players certainly are racing ahead in other fields, like Uber, in case you didn't hear, wants to go beyond just driving. Uber Works as a program that can help you in your home, cooking, cleaning, a whole bunch of stuff. Back with James Freeman and Paul Dietrich and Jeannie Zaino. Jeannie, what do you think of this?
I love any help I can get with cooking and cleaning, so I'm all for it. But, one thing that does concern me is Uber's recent, I think December 5th, they released this safety report with an astounding number of reports of sexual assaults and, those kinds of things. So I think they run a real risk, not just in the driving business, but if they're getting into our homes in terms of how you protect both the customers and the workers. How do you screen them? And that safety report was very, very concerning. Huge risk for Uber, I think.
What do you think?
That's a problem with any temporary worker situation, whether it's your plumber or anything else. And there should be a way to solve that through background checks and things like that. This Uber Works is an interesting thing for Uber because I call it the Uber Angie's list. This is a disruptive technology. They're using the technology and the apps that they already have to take on a whole new industry, the temporary worker industry. If you have a party tonight and you need your house cleaned, they'll be there in 20 minutes, and you'll see where they're coming to.
Are they driving by my place?
Yes.
Can they stop by?
And you know how it started? It's a fascinating story. When they started Uber Eats in Chicago, the restaurants were overwhelmed by the demand for Uber Eats, and so they were recruiting their drivers to come in and help these people at the restaurants to do it. So it came out of a kind of a necessity, and they thought, oh my goodness, I can use my same technology. I don't have to spend any more capital, and I can create an Uber. What Uber did to taxis, it's going to do to the temporary workforce people, recruiters in America. This is a disruptive technology.
Yeah, but I do agree with Jeannie in this. They better get that clientele issue right? I mean, the people who come to your home.
Well, I mean, at a certain size, you're going to have some level of crime in any large population. As these things get bigger, the numbers are going to get bigger. But I think, on balance, these disruptions are great for consumers. And I say get into more markets. Unfortunately, California is really disrupting the gig economy with new regulations. But I think if the government will lay off the gig economy, leave Uber alone, leave the vapors alone, then a lot of good consumer benefits can come here.
All right. but you don't want the crazy characters. I think there's got to be a way.
I'm against craziness. I'm definitely
you're anti-crazy. All right, that's right. In the meantime,
or libertarian.
Yeah, libertarian. Yeah, cook for me, but better not, reach for the knives. All right. Meanwhile, personal finance app Pillar wants you to help pay off your loved one's student loans this holiday. It works pretty simple. Point, click, and then pay them off, or pay some of them off. What do you think?
I think it's great. I mean, okay, in a way, I do think it seems a little cold that for the holidays you're giving, but, look at my students are facing enormous debt, as are many other people.
Sure.
So I think the idea that you can give something that they can actually use, I think it's great.
What do you think?
Yeah, well, Neil, you know better than anyone that nothing says happy holidays like your aunt paying $50 off of your student loan. But it is a problem. There's $1.6 trillion in student loan debt in the United States. And I know people have laughed at this, saying, well, $50 here and there doesn't matter. At my firm, B. Riley Wealth Management, we believe every little bit helps. This is a great idea, and who the heck knows what a millennial wants for Christmas?
Right.
This
a gift card.
This is a better alternative.
Processed meats and cheeses are one thing, but paying off your loans, that's another thing. What do you think?
Well, I know you've been wondering what to get me for Christmas. I'd love to take a break from the mortgage this month, but I think workarounds are great, but the core issue is college education is too expensive. Yeah. And I think you get back to what is the core problem. It is a lot of well-intended subsidies from Washington intended to make things affordable. And we've seen the result. It's the opposite.
But you know what I will tell you guys, and it's a trend here, and it's begun with people who want to give stock to young people or anyone, that this push to go beyond traditional gifts with money that you get or an investment that you could start a young person off with and all, but that's gaining no play on words currency this holiday.
Yeah, and I've done that myself, I have to say, with my own kids, and they really like it, and it does teach them lessons.
I demand it in reverse. I want my kids to give me.
I never figured that out. Right? That's my problem.
Program.
Hey, my parents, when I was born, I won't tell you when. I mean, they gave me a savings. The savings bonds in those days. This is nothing new. And I think, really, this ought to be encouraged.
What do you think?
Yeah, savings.
This is politically correct. Yeah, sure, whatever. All right, guys, thank you all very, very much. They're a good bunch.